Nithyanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganasadusham Tattvamasya Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Nithyanandam, welcome to another episode of Nithyananda Leelas. Today I have a wonderful guest from the U.S., Daniel.
Nithyanandam.
And he's one of the natural Jetta crowd like me. I haven't let mine loose yet, but he's growing his out naturally per Swamiji's instructions to do the Shiva Jettas, which in the U.S. are often known as dreadlocks. But for all you Rastafarians out there, just know that Shiva was the first dread on the planet, and they're actually called Jettas. So welcome.
Thank you.
And what I like about your journey is that you just literally witnessed the transformation your girlfriend went through and went, I got to go to IA.
Gotta go. Yep. So around the time I was living in California, actually, and I was traveling around and just like exploring the world and had this feeling of intense seeking. Like I wanted to, I was thinking at the time, like I need to go like live in a monastery or something and just like check it out or something. And I was studying more Buddhism at that time, and then I met a friend, and he had this little book, and it was actually a book of poems by Yogananda, and that kind of pushed me towards Hinduism. But through books, there's something that's just, it's not alive, it's never changing, it's the same thing. So then I met this girl named Kelsey at a festival called Symbiosis, and we exchanged phone numbers and started hanging out, and she ended up going to India to do this 21-day program called Inner Awakening. I had no idea what it was about, and she came back, and I told her to come hang out with me, and she came, and just the space that she was holding, it was super expansive and powerful and still, and it was tangible for me. Just seeing where she was and what she was like when she came back, there was like a definite transformation that had happened, and it really like created this curiosity in me, like this spark of I had to go do that, you know. So then I started watching the satsangs after that, actually, and I really like connected with Swamiji on the emotional level, and also just like the jnana, like the knowledge that he gives out every day. I was like, this guy is just everything that's going on in my life right now, he's talking about directly. And so that it really inspired me, and I made the decision to take the jump and started my journey to Inner Awakening.
So which was the IA that you showed up at?
I went to February 2014 here in Bidadi.
Oh, so you came straight to the heart of everything.
Yes.
Was that a shock for you, or were you kind of ready? If you had been traveling and seeking, I'm sure that nomadic lifestyle prepared you for living in more of a village atmosphere.
Definitely. And also, I had been living in Oakland at the time in a warehouse with 15 people. So I'd also lived in like a co-op with like 35 people before, and so like being in large communities of people was pretty normal thing for me at that time.
So it's almost like in a past life you had been in an ashram or something, because you were drawn. Not many people are drawn to that kind of a setting.
Yeah, community living is something I really enjoy. It needs a lot of meditative space at times, but there's also, I like that there's always something happening, and you can engage in so many different variations of yourself, right?
Yeah, and to me, whenever I've been in those kinds of setups, I was in an artist loft, and it reminds you we were never meant to be alone. You know, we are communal creatures.
Yeah.
So, you know, when Swamiji says he wants to bring back the village lifestyle, I understand why. He's not just talking about living in ashrams and adinams. He's saying be in a village and help each other.
Right, yeah. It seems like at least I'm from the United States, and a lot of the energy there in neighborhoods is pretty disconnected. Like, you're lucky to know your neighbors' names a lot of the time. It's not how it used to be, where I remember as a kid, you know, you knew all your neighbors, and you'd go knock on their door and be like, what's going on? And you might hang out or borrow something from one another. And just the older I've gotten, the more it seems like that's not really the case anymore. People become more isolated.
There's an alienation happening, and I don't know what's triggered it. Maybe it's the electronic devices. Maybe it's like Swamiji says, plugging into the matrix. But same thing. I was on a street that was only a block long, and there was 60 kids in that block, and they literally would just sort of close off the ends, and we would just run riot on that street, playing kick the can and doing hide and seek and building forts. And it's like whatever house you wound up in, you got fed. You know, everyone just looked out for everyone's kids. And when I was raising my son, that had left. Like, it was very unusual to find that kind of a setting.
Yeah, I think part of it too might be there's kind of an atmosphere of fear that they try to create in the United States. I don't know if it's for control, probably, but you need to alleviate yourself from that. And I think that fear makes you isolate yourself from other people instead of engaging with them from like a loving open space.
Yeah, and I know a lot of psychologists are saying there's a real problem because kids aren't allowed to just go play. It has to be an organized play date. They have to be driven to it, and it has to be under a controlled situation. And, you know, me and my friends, you would literally leave the house in the morning in the summertime, and your parents hoped you would wander back by dinner time. But they didn't. There was no stress. You know, they weren't worried about where you were because they knew you were safe, and that is missing in our society. And I know Swamiji talks about this matrix, right? The Maya matrix, and it's the matrix of delusion. So if nothing else, that's what inner awakening does, is at least pulls that veil off your eyes. So what were your experiences at inner awakening? Like, what was the first impact for you?
The first impact? Well, doing completion with the mirrors, at first I was like, there was some sort of resistance, and I was like, it's not working. And then I tried to like tell Nyanatma, like, Ma, like, it's not working. Like, I just don't get it. And she's just like, no, like, go sit back with the mirror. And like, she didn't like take it for a second. She was just like, no, like, there you go on down and keep doing it. And then you like finally start to feel some of that release. And I think another powerful thing was just starting to feel Swamiji's presence everywhere, right? And in everything and everyone, and seeing how people are so much a reflection of ourselves.
Had you ever experienced any kind of spiritual energies like him? Like in any of your practices previously, had you ever encountered the kind of energy that he imbibes?
Not as powerful. Like, I've had experience with people just connecting where you kind of have that pure connection, and it seems like in those times you're almost tapping into that source more, like you're going beyond the body, which I think is the energy that he's embodying.
And I know he talks too about how he needs people to experience the world to be able to experience him. And once a while ago he said, if you haven't ever fallen in love, you're not going to be able to love him. And it's an interesting dimension. And I think what he saw when he was on his wandering days, that a lot of these monks and brahmacharis that are locked up in sequestered societies who've never really lived outside, they have a detachment from the divine because they've never just completely melted into somebody else, right? So they don't know how to melt into cosmos when it appears.
Yeah. And I think for me that's like one of the scarier aspects, right? Because you start melting into somebody else, and then you start almost losing a little bit of your identity, right? And so I think that losing of the identity is like the thing that scares my mind the most, but excites my heart the most. But yeah, I think love is a really important thing, and I also think the ability to have people leave also is super important, because the planet needs this. And it's like the way I found it, right? It's like I met somebody who was holding that energy, and it drew me here to have an experience, and then we're able to go out and just inspire more people and bless and heal the world.
Exactly. And like you say, the space that she was holding when she came back, it's a lot of these things that we talk about are experiential. It's hard to just have somebody sit on their couch and say, well, impress me, just tell me what it is. And it's like you have to experience this, because it's a state that there's no description for it. And even Swamiji says English words aren't even good for describing these states, because Sanskrit, the original language, was created around these events. And so only Sanskrit really describes the different samadhi states. He talks about falling into Baba Samadhi, and there's no English equivalent for that. But so have you, a lot of people when they get in front of Swamiji, they blank out and they don't remember to ask for anything. And then they get back down their seat and like, oh, I was going to tell him this or ask him this. Have you been able to get some resolution to some of your questions in life when you've received darshan?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've spent enough time with him at this point where, like, the first time I went up, I was totally like deer in the headlights, like, oh, I could barely mumble out my questions to him, or because the first thing he asked us was like, what do you all want? Yeah. You know, so we had to all go up there and tell him what we wanted. And I have experienced those states, but I feel like in a way, that aspect is all for the mind, right? Because he's connected to our inner space. So the questions that we have, he sees them. It's only when we verbalize it and then he gives us the response that's just settling the part of the mind that wants a resolution, right, not the actual space that needs healing.
Because he talks about how in Dakshinamurti's time, he taught in absolute silence. And people would just come sit around him and they would get it. But he said, I have to talk so you guys won't. Because he said, if I got a room full of you and sat here in silence, he knows we'd all start chattering away to each other because our minds wouldn't be able to take it, right? It would not be able to stand. What do you mean we're just sitting here? And so, but as he says, the ultimate is to just be in the space, because he works on us on that other level. And like you say, he knows the question, he sees that question sitting in you. And when I first saw him answering questions and interrupting people, I thought, well, that's kind of rude. But it's because he sees the question. And rather than wait for the person to blurt it out or get it wrong, he just goes straight in like a razor, right? And nails it. And a lot of times, as he said, we're not even asking the right question. He sees the question that's inside, and so the words that are flittering out might be completely wrong. So he just dives in and goes for the right one. But it's interesting when you talk about that loss of identity, because I know that's what frightens a lot of people back in Canada, where I'm from, and they don't realize it's not so much identity as ego. You know, your ego refuses to die, and so it will hold on no matter what, but your identity is actually more massive, you know, such a bigger, more beautiful thing, and it's just being hidden by this mask.
Right, yeah, it's like the identity is just like the pure consciousness, right? And the ego is like the body and the way we kind of like express ourselves to others, but we only put that shell on to feel safe, right? But if you really start looking in and digging, that it's just like infinite space inside. And yeah, about the Dakshinamurti thing, it's like when I left my first inner awakening too, I just felt like this deep stillness, like the thoughts stopped, right? It wasn't like I didn't have anything going on, but it was like it wasn't as much words as it was knowing. Like I would have a novel idea of something and it would be more visual than it would be like, I'm going to create this thing and walk to the store, you know, like the inner chatter stopped, and it was super powerful.
So are you an artist? Like what is your the career that you follow, or the dreams that you have?
I do everything right now, and right now I'm a driver for like a very fancy pizza place, and I've worked construction, waited tables, done landscaping. I've done a lot of stuff.
So you probably are a seeker, because those of us who are seekers have that kind of resume.
Yeah. I asked him at my first IA, I was like, what should I do for a job? And he was like, I'll tell you. And then the next day his satsang was in it, he was like, some people come and they ask me, like, should I do this? Or should I do this? And he's like, and I just tell them, you should do everything. I was like, oh, God.
Well, and I felt so good because my family was so upset about my resume. At this point, I actually posted it on Facebook once because someone said, have you hit 60 jobs yet? And so I listed them, and it was over 60. And when he said that that was a good thing, I was just, yay! Because everyone else is, if you would just stick to something, you might get ahead. You know, you might get the promotion and the title and everything else. But, you know, I had on Usha Kent just the other day, and she talked about how she reached the pinnacle of her IT career and had the private cars and the jets and the life and walked away from it. She said it wasn't enough. So I hip-hopped through so many jobs because it was that same feeling, this isn't enough.
Yeah, I feel that, you know, because most of the jobs I go to, I'm like, this isn't the ultimate. Everything that I go and do, I'm just like, I'll do it, and then I'm like, okay, I understand this, and it's just like, what now, you know? So that's like pushed me a lot in my exploring. That's something that I love. It's like traveling and exploring because you go find new stuff, right? It's like with jobs, it becomes a little bit redundant when you do the same thing day in and day out.
Well, and that's what Swamiji warns against. He said, once you've mastered something, move on or take on more responsibility where you are, but don't stay in a job where it's so predictable that you could do it in your sleep, right? So
Right.
you have the right attitude.
Yeah. Right now I'm brainstorming ideas for being my own boss because he also says that that's an important thing to do, and I totally see it. And I mean, at this job, I love what I'm doing, but there's certain times where like they'll do something. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally work for you. You have complete control over my career here and what I'm doing. And I also see what he's saying about where it's hard to maintain a really high energy in certain situations when you're totally uninvolved in it, right? Like, if there's nothing going on as a driver, I might just stand there, or it's like wipe down something, but you're not like excited about it, you know? It's not something that like motivates you.
So for those of you watching, Daniel's not here attending IA. He's one of the volunteers. And so this is something, when you've attended an inner awakening, you can come back, stay here for free, get the darshans, but you are a volunteer. So you help out with whatever needs helping out. And so it's perfect for someone like you who knows how to roll with it and just do this, run here, run there. You know, they need people like you to attend these programs. And the beauty of it is you get to come and swim in the energy.
I've also been thinking it's really beautiful because as an IA participant, it's like you're in the hall or you're back at your dorm doing completion or you're back in the hall, right? And it's like, even this time, it's like they're like, okay, carry these massive things and like help set up the stage and taking stuff back to Sacred Arts, and it's like seeing a whole nother dimension of the property and how everything's going just to make these people's experience good, you know? And like the people in the kitchen, like working nonstop and just taking care of everything. It's really beautiful, and you kind of are able to understand it from a more like 360 degree perspective than just looking towards the stage, you know.
Well, and I think too, it helps you in the long run, because who knows what he's working on in you as far as what you will do when you go out. Like, it'll probably open up a dimension that you hadn't realized you had in you with the volunteering. I've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah, and it's also helped me complete some other stuff, right? Because like I was working construction last summer, and every time it would rain, I'd be like, I don't want to be working like right now. And like just like go and try to get out of the rain, you know. And it's like we were lifting these huge stone slabs to pave this road, and it started raining, and it was just like, yeah, just keep going, man. I was like, why is everybody stopping? It was just more clear. It was like everything. People are just like, will you help me? I'm just like, yes, I will. Like, to a point where it's like even some of the people are like, dude, you can't just do, like, when there's tons of people here who need things done, and it's like everybody's gonna ask you, so it's like just check in before you go running off, you know.
But that's true. I find the whining drops down to such a minimum. And same thing when we go to the Kumbh Melas and you go into the river, you go in, like for the women, you go in a full sari. So the first time that happened, you're like, really? I'm just going to walk into a river fully clothed. But you go in, and of course, being India and warm, everything dries immediately. So I have the same attitude now. I never walk around with an umbrella. If it rains, it's like, all right. You get soaked, you dry off.
It's like a free little bath, right?
And Swamiji, as Swamiji says, rain is auspicious. Like when rain happens, it's usually the cosmos going, way to go, guys, or I appreciate what you're doing. It happened the other day, when we were setting up for Rudrabhishekam at the big Shiva Lingam, this gentle rain started, and it was like we were being blessed for setting up for this beautiful sacred ceremony. So it's changed my cognition about weather completely.
Yeah, it's important, he says, to have a deep friendliness with weather and all the elements. And even just recently he was saying, like, people think things are supernatural, right? But we just know that nature's super.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the powers that manifests with the third eye. And some of the students, the Gurukul kids, are already doing it. But like you say, they become friends with the weather. So then if they want it to rain or stop raining, they just ask. And so they control things going on and off at a regular basis. So I'd like to see how that works in Canada with blizzards. Like that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I'm in Minneapolis right now, so that'd be nice there as well. I mean, like, well, maybe can we just be warm today? But
yeah, just a little bit of sunshine today and melt the black ice. And so you're here until the end of this inner awakening. And then what are your plans?
I'm gonna go back, and I lost my job coming here, because if you don't clock in for 30 days, then you're like. But she said she'd rehire me, so I've got a job and I've got my apartment. And we're probably gonna be moving soon, and I'm gonna be working more on starting more personal business stuff and trying to shift into that, because he says anything that you do for a year, you're gonna be able to do that for a living. So.
Well, and something that I found too was when I first went back from being here in 2010 was meditation groups just sprang up around me. People would literally, like you say, they saw the space and they would say, would you be interested in teaching meditation at my yoga shop or wherever? And when I put that first, the work followed. So it was, if you just hold that context, it's really quite interesting. Swamiji just takes care. So if someone says, can you teach me to meditate? And you just go, sure. Yeah. And at one point, it's funny because I paid off my debt from being a single mom as a driver. I joined the Teamsters. And so despite the degree and everything else, it was driving that completed my life for me. And same thing, I love it. I love driving. But at one point, someone was brought to the meditation group who was really in trouble, had come out of some very hard times. And all of a sudden, I just was available every day to do yoga or meditate or give advice. And I would keep saying to Cosmos, I could use a driving job because freelance, right? And it's like, just do what's in front of you. So I just kept, helping, doing the meditation groups. And right when I was about ready to snap, because I was buying into what the Matrix was telling me, was that you are running out of money instead of following the existential reality of Swamiji taking care, right? So it was an amazing lesson for me. But I just kept doing what was in front of me, helping. And then out of the blue, that huge movie, Interstellar, the big sci-fi movie, was filming in my area. And all the A-listers got the driving jobs. And I was way down the list. But one of them got a better offer, but could only take it if she could replace herself. And she phoned me, could you come take my contract for me? Yes, I could.
Cool.
And I wound up with the biggest paying job I've ever had. And it paid off the debt and allowed me to come back to India. And as soon as I checked into the 5-star hotel and was handed my per diem wad of money, I could hear Cosmos going, I told you I'd take care of you.
Nice. Beautiful.
So, as long as you keep the existential reality as the first priority, the rest of it, it's like whatever is going to be the most fun, that's what it throws at you.
I like fun, so that's good.
So you're going to have to stay in touch and let me know what happens once you get back there.
Yes.
And with that, we'll close with the Purna Mantra. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's a strange thing to ask, but
it's cool.
Cool. We'll close with the Purna Mantra.
All right.
Om
Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sarvam Sadguru Paduka Pranamastu Om Nithyanandam